Imagine if today was the day your idea changed someone's life. Imagine if you could help someone pay for college, help your community build a new playground, or help a child make it to that dream competition. With GoFundMe, it's all possible. GoFundMe is the world's #1 fundraising platform trusted by over 190 million people. Every week, ordinary people meet their goals and do extraordinary things. Your ideas matter. GoFundMe isn't just for emergencies. Want to raise money for your kid's soccer team or raise funds for a small business, a creative project, or event? GoFundMe helps you turn ideas into reality. And help adds up. Fundraisers you start for someone else raise up to 5 times more. So think right now, who could use your help? Change rarely comes from waiting. It comes from someone deciding, today I'll start. Don't wait for someone else to bring change. Today, start your fundraiser in just minutes at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com to start your fundraiser. GoFundMe.com. This is a commercial message brought to you by GoFundMe.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
You are not alone. And now there are 2 resources that I've put together specifically for your journey. This is your host, Rachel Bernstein. I am an educator and a therapist and a cult specialist. And I am very excited to announce Restart and Restore, a journal for survivors of manipulation, and a companion notebook that I've put together to go with it that has people's stories that they've shared with me that they wanted to share with you, and some wonderful quotes from people whose thoughts I truly admire, and more pages and writing prompts for you to continue with the writing that can help you along your healing journey. This isn't just another blank journal. It's a trauma-informed recovery companion, and it offers psychoeducation on the mechanics of manipulation and control and therapeutic writing prompts to explore your history and your strengths, practical exercises that transform insights into some actionable steps, and the freedom to heal at your own pace. You can do it in the time frame that works for you without any judgment or pressure. Whether you joined the organization or the relationship that was controlling as a teen or as an adult, Restart and Restore provides the structure and, I think, validation needed to process your experiences safely. I'm also excited to share, beyond the journal and its companion notebook, that I'm currently working on a second journal specifically for those born and raised in high control groups or high control family units, as their healing journey often involves different and specialized challenges. Restart and Restore and its companion notebook are available now, and you can find the link in the show notes. Thank you very much. I hope it's helpful to you or to someone you love. Hello, everyone. Today on the show, I'm very happy to have Mark Scheeren. Mark Scheeren co-founded Baldwin Research Institute, Incorporated in 1992, and is currently its chairman. And Mark co-authored the revolutionary book, The Freedom Model for Addictions: Escape the Treatment and Recovery Trap, with Stephen Slate and Michelle Dunbar. He's credited with coining the phrase non-12-step in the early 90s and established the first and only completely non-12-step residential solution for drug and alcohol problems in the world, the St. Jude Retreats. And Mark is also the co-host of the popular Addiction Solution podcast. Mark ran the longest observational study ever conducted in the addiction research field by living with the study subjects for a period of 12 consecutive years. This provided him with a firsthand account of how best to help people to solve their substance use problems. As a noted 12-step and recovery society historian, Mr. Scheeren is an expert on the false and misleading addiction brain disease disorder concept and the continuing failings of the 12-step and treatment recovery paradigm as a whole. With this knowledge coupled with his personal experiences leaving AA, he designed the Deprogramming from 12 Steps course, now available to the world for those seeking a way to move past the confines of the 12-step method and into greater self-expression and personal freedom. Mark is also well known in alcohol and drug research circles for his courageous and outspoken public service campaign, Treatment Doesn't Work. It is my pleasure to welcome Mark to the show. Here he is now. Well, hello. Today on the show, we have Mark Scheeren, who is someone who has a very interesting personal story to share, but also a lot about how you look at something systemically that has been in place, that has been the go-to, that has been this gold standard, and really evaluate it without blinders on, without just saying, well, if this is the only thing, it must be what everyone needs and it must be the best, because that's not necessarily the case. And so for you to help us navigate what you were seeing and what needed to be developed, sort of what was missing in that space, and not only what was missing, but really what had to be undone because it was potentially destructive. So there's a lot to talk about, but I want to take a moment and welcome you to the show and have you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Mark Scheeren. It's an honor to be on this podcast. It's always an honor to talk to the public about something that I think, certainly in my case, I think is important. I've spent 36 years studying treatment and what I call the Recovery Society, which is a blanket term that we use here at the Freedom Model. And I had a very, very unique upbringing and a set of circumstances that cast me into a place that made me question everything about recovery. And specifically where that started was Alcoholics Anonymous, because I was born into it, quite literally born into a family that was steeped in that model. So I can go into my story now, or if you have specific questions, I don't want to just ramble on.
I would love for you to go into your history. I think also just the word recovery, I feel like it's something that has to really be explored. What does that mean? What does that look like? Is it an emotional thing? Is it a physiological thing? How do you get there? And also, I'll make a note of this, that we can get into this, about how there are some people who, within a certain model, unlike yours, will say that it is lifelong and a lifetime thing that you kind of never really achieve. If you always need a group and you always need to follow certain steps forever, then it's sort of like being on Weight Watchers forever. At some point, do you get to say, like, I think I've achieved something and now I can do this on my own? So just that whole idea of recovery being something that is momentary or however long you need it, or this model of forever. And what that does, I think, to the psyche, to think you're going to always need something in order to stay okay. But I would love for people to hear, I mean, just even that phrase, like, I was born into it. I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
So tell us about you. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, you framed out a lot of different topics there, so I'm going to hammer through some things, some concepts first.
Cool. Okay.
So this idea of recovery was born out of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the 12-step paradigm is really the first paradigm or method or idea, set group of ideas, where they personified alcohol and substances as being an enemy or a disease or a pathogen. And that's a very strange idea, first of all, because it's not one. It certainly can be a poison. And so if we were to use the term recovery appropriately, what we would be talking about, and we're going to use alcohol. Let's just talk about alcohol. We can, if we add in drugs, that's a whole nother landscape that would really require another podcast. So I'm going to stick with alcohol for the purposes of what we're talking about. But if you poison yourself with the overuse of alcohol physically, you do need to recover. If you do enough of that bad habit and you poison yourself enough, you may need detox for withdrawal and you may need some recovery time, and you will recover from a physical malady of delirium tremens anywhere between 3 and 10 days, and you will recover. But anything beyond that, the term recovery begins to implicate that there is something mentally and emotionally broken. Because if there isn't something that's broken, there's nothing to recover from. So AA is also the very beginning of mainstreaming the false disease ideal or idea. Addiction is not a disease. And that's been proven endless amounts of times by just not me, but many researchers throughout the world. And it's not a disorder either. The overuse of alcohol or the heavy use of alcohol is a common thing that about 10% of the population indulges in. And that's been true for a long time and very consistent. So calling relatively normal behaviors or habits diseases in which you need to recover from, and also that you never fully recover from them, is a big, giant batch of mythology that was developed, ironically, by Bill Wilson and several other bad actors in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So there's nothing to recover from.
I think that that's already going to blow people's minds because it is so different from the constant talk about it and the repetitive messaging. Also, can you describe what you mean by bad actors here so people know what that means, and then we'll talk about you?
First of all, I think that Bill Wilson is the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill Wilson and this fellow, Dr. Bob Smith. And in 1935, he came up with an idea that there was this disease, and that came from other people, Benjamin Rush, all the way back to Benjamin Rush. There was this sort of idea percolating that dipsomania, or drinking a lot, was somehow beyond your control. And then he took it and said, I can make a lot of money at this. So he wrote the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was broke at the time, and he had a massive drinking problem. And supposedly he had this massive spiritual experience that he was relieved of his alcoholism. And so he took this sort of first century Christian ideal, coupled it with the mythology of the disease of addiction, started to mainstream that, wrote a book about mixing this pseudoscience, which really had no basis in reality, coupled it with this first century Christian spiritualism, and created Alcoholics Anonymous. None of it was based in any research or fact. And as a matter of fact, the first 4 years that he implemented his model in Manhattan, it was a complete and utter failure. And it was a total catastrophe. But yet, when you read that first edition of his book, he acts like he's got a 75% success rate and that all these people were relieved of their alcoholism. It was all just made up. These are the things that people don't know. I didn't know them growing up in AA. So that's what I would call a bad actor. That's somebody that said, I'm just going to fleece everybody and make a bunch of money on a book, and also build this entire meeting structure around the fear of this personified version of alcohol, that it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. That's read at the beginning of every AA meeting in the world, daily, millions of times a year. So we have this idea. So let me summarize. Bill Wilson built alcohol into a cunning, baffling, and powerful entity that is your enemy. He personified it into a living creature that diseases you, renders you incapable of being able to stop yourself from using it, which we now call addiction, where you can't stop without an external means of intervention, whether that's a medication like naltrexone or meetings and talk therapy, and that you're going to need these protocols for the rest of your life, and we will call them recovery from the disease of addiction. There. That really lays out the whole mythology umbrella, and everything I just said is factually incorrect.
Wow.
All of it. There isn't a single thing I said that has a basis in actual reality. But here's the problem. When you repeat it enough culturally for decades and decades and decades, and people have severe issues with the substance. I'm not denigrating or avoiding the idea that there's this group of people that I know because I had withdrawal. I know what it's like to drink every day almost to death with pancreatitis and the whole nine. So when you have a population that is struggling with a habit, and then you pull in all these half-truths where you say, look, this is what Bill Wilson did, which was really genius. Look at this powerless group, and they look powerless. They look powerless, and you feel powerless at the time because you're vulnerable, you're beat up, and you have this habit, and you're wondering, why am I doing this? And you're utterly confused and confounded with your own actions. And then somebody walks in and says, oh, that's because alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. That becomes believable. And that moment he tapped into in society right during the temperance movement and prohibition. And there was a lot of lights on drinking and the illegality of it. And you had the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago based on bootleggers. And so the idea of demon rum became massively accepted. So you had all these societal factors that he tapped into as well. And suddenly it becomes a disease. And then in 1951, the AMA declared it a disease. They didn't prove it. They said they declared it a disease because health insurance became something new and there was a lot of money to be made. And so they tapped into this entire infrastructure that was now being built. And then it became a method of payment with a diagnostic code, and the treatment industry was born.
Incredible.
So that's how this happens.
Wow. I have so many reactions to this. First, this idea of having to call yourself something. In the work that I do, that's what people are dealing with sometimes at their core. Like, I know I am this. And I'm thinking, do you know that? And do you know the definition of that? From character flaws to a lot of women and girls even in Bible-based cults are called temptresses. Because, I don't know, they sang as they were walking by or whatever. They showed their ankle. So they must have something inside of them that is flawed and is causing other people to behave a certain way around them. Like they have this somehow thing about them that they have to exorcise. They have to somehow get out or just know about themselves. And that becomes the thing that then, if you believe it, has you feel like, well, I guess I deserve bad things, or this is my lot in life. I don't know how it helps to have people say that they're alcoholics and need to believe that about themselves. It would be so much better if the messaging was, we don't want you or we don't need for you to believe you're an alcoholic. We need for you to believe you're strong. We need for you to believe that people love you and want what's best for you. We need for you to believe there's help for your depression because you're using alcohol to self-medicate. I remember going to a talk also years ago where somebody said, and it didn't go over well. It's interesting with this. It doesn't go over well. There was a scientist who was talking about alcoholism and how a tiny percentage of the population can actually be called alcoholics. Tiny. But, it is the whole population of people in AA. And I remember I went over my old notes from some talk. Someone with alcohol dependence, otherwise known as a true alcoholic, is marked by having tolerance, withdrawal, neurochemical adaptations, and compulsive use. These things need to be met, and it can't be that it is that they're using alcohol as a way to self-medicate unsolved trauma, anxiety, or depression.
Okay. Do you want me to respond on that?
Yeah, I'm curious. This was about 10 years ago, and people got up and left. Like, that goes against what we were told.
Yeah. So I would argue, and based on the book we wrote, alcoholism is a myth. Regardless of the severity of your habit, this is important. We know statistically that it doesn't matter how long or how severe your habit is, you have the same probability of getting over the problem as the person who just started drinking. This is important. The most common way that somebody that is diagnosed with all of those things that you described, the most common way that the person that's diagnosed with all of those things that gets over the problem is by doing it on their own. No treatment, no intervention. They just simply sit on their couch one day after 20 years of pounding vodka every night, and they go, I'm done. I'm done. Now, here's the interesting part. Let's say you have withdrawal. They always point at withdrawal, big time with the opiate issue. They always point to, you have withdrawal. That makes you an alcoholic. And I say, no, that makes you poisoned. That makes you poisoned. That's why we call it detoxification. You've poisoned yourself. If somebody had a habit of poisoning themselves or being in the cage with rattlesnakes because they had a fetish with rattlesnakes, we wouldn't say they have rattlesnakeism. We'd say they were foolhardy. We wouldn't say they have a disease that renders them incapable of stopping themselves from being in the cage with the rattlesnakes. We might say they're fucking nuts. Okay. But we wouldn't call them diseased or disordered or something. We would say that is foolhardy. There was a little humor there earlier. But my point is, just because you have consequences doesn't render you incapable of change. It doesn't render you powerless.
I like that.
Or that it's involuntary. Just because there's consequences doesn't mean it's involuntary. Because the whole framework of the alcoholic definition by common terms is that you are compelled or it's an involuntary thing you can't control. But then they point at, it's interesting, they point at the consequences and then they say, see, it's involuntary. I say, wait a minute, there's no equivalency there. Just because somebody pounds vodka every single day or sticks a needle in their arm every day does not mean it's involuntary. Just because they have withdrawal or they've lost their wife or they've lost their career or they've had abscesses in their arms and they have hepatitis B and crashed a car and killed a family. None of that means that the act of drinking at the beginning was involuntary. So there is no alcoholism present. There is a habit, a confounding confusion about why I do what I do. That's different. And that's fixable. That's eminently fixable. Why do I like to drink so much? And that question is never asked in a rehab. Never.
The why, that is fascinating. Wow. So it's just the behavior, not the why, not finding out, not getting behind it. It's like sometimes I've talked about this on the podcast. Parents will sometimes bring their kids, and I do education and I special ed and working with some kids who have different sorts of issues, but sometimes they'll bring their kids to me and say, he's a pathological liar. Maybe. I mean, there's a small percentage of the population that has sociopathic tendencies and can be that. But then I see that if he tells the truth, it's dangerous. He will get punished. He'll be called something. He'll be ostracized. So he's just being smart. He's being adaptive to the situation where he's limited and backed into a corner. And then he is labeled this thing. He's the one who needs help, not the systemic problem here. Let's look at the why. Why is this behavior happening? It's interesting.
Yeah. And so when I coach somebody and I'm going through a coaching session with them and I ask them, why do you like drinking? And they say, I don't. I hate it. And I go, that's not true. Your actions belie your inner truth. You drink every day, so you like it. Yes, you do. Why do you have such a hard time saying that you like it? And they kind of sit back in their chair. And I go, now, this is a judgment-free session. There's nobody else in this room with us. Let's say you were the client, the student. I'd say, there's nobody else in here. I already know that you like drinking because your actions belie your inner truth. We always move in the direction of what we believe is most beneficial to us in every moment of our lives. Right now, you're sitting in that chair because you think it's the best use of your time. If you didn't, you wouldn't. To the same degree, when you leave here and you go get that bottle of vodka and you get excited on the way to the liquor store, your heart starts pounding. You're like, I can't wait. In the privacy of your mind, why? Why do you like it? And then they kind of slyly smile and they go, nobody's ever asked me that. I go, I know. I know you like drinking. Now, the treatment system, your family is going to say they do what's called, what I call a reverse analysis. They look at all the carnage and they say, I'm looking at all the carnage. Therefore, logically, I think you didn't choose this. But what the drinker does is they look at the front end. Let's switch the order. In their mind, they go, I can't wait to drink to get the benefits of being hammered, and I'm willing to pay the price downstream. So by ignoring the front end motivation, the benefits, the perceived benefits of being drunk, we're ignoring the whole thing. So what treatment does is they say, write down a list of everything you fucked up in your life. And you need to get clean, implying you're dirty, by the way. You need to get clean. Now write down a list of everything you've lost. So they're doing the reverse analysis. Basically, you're a piece of shit. You're diseased. You have no control, and you have to focus on the consequences. Now, when we do this, and this is AA in spades, by the way, when you do this and you focus on all the carnage, you ignore and you actually make drinking look more appealing, because the very things that you love about drinking so much, you're still hanging on to. I call it a shiny disco ball. So you have your shiny disco ball over here, and everybody's going, you're a piece of garbage. You're diseased. You can't stop. You need to go to meetings the rest of your life. You're going to be in recovery and suffer because you love your little thing and it's dirty and you're wrong. And meanwhile, you're going, the only thing I got left is my disco ball. See you later. I'm going to go to the hotel and lock myself in for 5 days. And so that's why people die. That's why the kill rates or the suicide rates and all the accidental death rates are so high in Alcoholics Anonymous, is because it literally drives the problem.
Right. It's self-concept also, and there are no safeguards within the whole movement. I mean, I know of people who've really been harmed and put in harm's way. There's also this other little story that I'm now remembering as we're talking, that a dear friend of mine had a son who suffered from tremendous amounts of depression and would go in on himself and would become suicidal. It was horrible, just dark. He just felt this darkness inside that was so sad. And he was so lovely. It's still around today, but it needed a lot of support,
I got scared there for a minute.
Right? So, okay, jump to the end. Happy ending. And still struggles, but still has found a way to have things to look forward to and those sorts of things that really help. I got involved, though, in a way that I don't usually in people's personal stuff who aren't coming to my office, where this little kid was in it was like a partial hospitalization program. And suddenly I get a note from him where he's making amends. He's apologizing for a time that he was unfriendly at a party at my house. I had people over for the holidays, and he didn't want to talk to anyone because he had social anxiety. He had depression. The fact that he came at all was amazing. I almost got teary when I saw him come in, because I thought, oh, it's an incredible thing. And so hard for him to do this. And he's like, I'm sorry that I just spent the night petting your dogs and not talking to anyone. And I thought, what the hell? Why is he right? So on top of him feeling depressed, now he has to feel guilty and he has to make things right. So I called the place and I said, do you use a 12-step model? And they said, yeah, why? I said, how dare you? How dare you do this? Well, this is how we were trained. We were trained in the 12-step model, and we go through the steps. And I said, I got from someone who has a hard time getting out of bed and feeling hopeful about his life, I got like an apology letter. Why are you doing this to him? Anyone there? And they had no answer. But it was like this overlay that they had over the program. And I've seen that a lot. And that's how people are trained. That's what they do to other people. And then it just adds to someone's poor self-concept rather than helping them, making them feel better, I think, in the slightest. It was kind of devastating to know that. I didn't realize how often that happened.
Well, that's step 9. that you have to make amends or you'll drink again. It's so crazy because when I started the research, I started in AA. So here I was, this kid who drank and drugged for 6 years through my teens. My mother was a certified alcoholism counselor. A lot of my siblings were in and out of rehabs and AA. I was the youngest of the 12 kids. And so I watched this carnage of treatment and how it split my family apart. My mother ended up having an affair in AA, and that became my stepdad. And she left. She was gone when I was 7, and that was pretty devastating. She left 12 kids behind, and she was never the same. She was always this, everything was about AA. Everything was about self-help. I couldn't have a normal conversation with my mother without some sort of strange manipulative guilt being imposed or her starting to cry and carry on because that's what she needed to do for her recovery. It was this just really, really demented, sad thing. And her whole life with her children was affected by this. So eventually, I end up getting in this car accident and could have killed a couple of my buddies drunk driving. And I said to myself, I'm going to change my life right there. I was 18 years old. At that point, I'd been on a 6-month bender. I had withdrawal. My stomach, I started to have pancreatitis. I started having real issues because I was drinking a tremendous amount of booze and doing drugs and all kinds of crazy things. I went to jail, got out of jail, that whole thing. For the next 6 months, my life changed. There's a point to this story. My life changed because I was homeless. I wasn't allowed home, but I rebuilt myself. This 18-year-old kid out in the street, working in a warehouse, got back involved with college, started moving my life forward. And then the courts caught up with me. The court said, you have to go to treatment. I said, I don't. I'm really okay. I detoxed myself. I'm kicking ass. Everything's good. Well, I didn't have any rights. That's where you find out that you legitimately, when it comes to the treatment industry, you have no rights. So they put me in this intensive outpatient mental hospital model, which is insane. So I'm going into this mental hospital 8 hours a day and being told that I have a disease. I said, no, I don't. I don't have a disease. I'm fine. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. But then they're like, no, we're keeping you until you admit it. So I said, I have to do this for a year. I'll do it for a year, but I'm not saying I'm an alcoholic. I'm not saying I'm a drug addict. I am not. So at the end of the year, I said, give me my paper. They said, no. I said, wait, I finished. And they said, not until you admit complete defeat. And so they kept me another 6 months. Every day I'd go in, they'd say, are you ready to admit complete defeat? I'd say no. And they'd say, basically go sit in the corner then. And I wasn't allowed to be around any of the other patients. And so they basically worked on me for a year and a half until I started to rewrite my own history. And that's where things get weird because I started to doubt myself. What was happening was I was becoming institutionalized. And I'm a really tough kid. I really am. I'm sort of that kid that was always pushing the boundaries, but I was succumbing to the pressure. And finally, I was like, maybe I am an alcoholic. Now, mind you, I haven't drank at this point for 2 years. It's so logically insane that I haven't touched a drug. I am living out in the street. I'm basically homeless. I'm couch surfing. I can't work because I'm in this program all day. My life is cascading into utter and total depression. Ironically, I also got involved. There's a point to the story. I also got involved in a religious cult because now I'm searching. I'm going to AA. I'm going to treatment. They also mandated that I have to go to 2 meetings a day, hammered with this stuff. I'm in this program in a mental hospital. And now I'm visiting this church because with the bribe of bread, I'm going to eat at a homeless shelter. I go into this church. Now I'm in this realm of spiritual warfare and I'm taking on these weird concepts. Then I finally said, all right, fuck it. I'm an alcoholic. And they all, you've arrived. They love bomb me. They signed my paper and now I'm out. And I don't know what to do. I'm literally like, what do I do? So I went to my mother's house and I was going to kill myself. That moment, I had a moment of clarity that was the only clear moment, I think, in my life that I could define like this, where everything else kind of went away because I was so relieved to have it end. I was just like, I just don't want to live. And the clear thought was, wait a minute, I was so much better before all of this treatment. It was like a faded memory. And I wasn't even sure if the memory was true. And then it was real clear. Like I had a moment where the window opened up and I said, holy shit, I think I was in a cult. All this was very clear. It was very clear. That was the beginning of the freedom model. And that night I went to an AA meeting And this is where the whole point of the story comes in. I met Jerry Brown, Michelle's father. A lot of you that watch this will know who that is. That's my partner in business who's run the Freedom Model with me now as a researcher for 36 years. Michelle is. Her father was a career researcher. He was in AA doing research on why people were dying at a much higher rate, why young people were killing themselves. And so I became his research assistant that night. I went to this guy, and here's the irony. I started teaching people AA. I was so indoctrinated. Now, not the same AA. I already had this sort of idea that something was amiss. So there was already cracks in the armor of the cult. But I didn't know any better. So I start regurgitating that's how insane it was. And Jerry was struggling with his new concepts of freedom and the idea that I'm seeing a lot of people outside AA get on with their lives. That kind of, why? How are they doing that? And so as soon as you start gazing outside this framework, you suddenly realize that people are free to think. And that took me and Jerry 10 years to deconstruct the cult, to walk out and figure out and debunk and charge in and say, is that concept true? Yes or no? Let's look at all the research and let's test it in our retreats. And that's what we did. But we started teaching this very same thing that damn near killed us. And then we climbed out over almost really a 20-year period is what it took to fully integrate out of the cult.
Incredible. Oh my gosh, there's so much to respond to. First, this idea that you were ground down until you had to say, I am this thing. I am an alcoholic. And then when you say it, then you get into that headspace. I have to surrender to this. I have this disorder. I have a disease. Then they say, okay, bye. It's like finally getting someone to admit that they have some other kind of disease. And then the hospital says, great, now you're ready to leave. What? Wait, you just got me to believe that I have this thing that clearly means I can't trust myself in the world. My life is not going to be good without treatment. I have this lifelong problem. And then you're showing me the door? It is like they needed to get you to believe something and say something because that's how they were trained, similar to what you then put out in the world, which makes perfect sense. Here you're wanting to help, and this is the model you have. I see that actually a lot with people who will contact me and say, I left a particular kind of cultic group or religious group or self-help, multi-level marketing, whatever. And I wanted to start my own thing because I didn't like how controlling this other group was. And suddenly I rebuilt this sort of mini version of what I had before because that was the language. I knew how to motivate people. I knew how to get under people's skin. There is something also about, I think that's so appealing, that things come in formulas and things come in stages and things come in phrases. And it's so already bottled and you don't have to think. I know that there was a time I checked out an AA meeting because I have a friend who said, I go there all the time, but there's a creepiness. It happened to be she's whatever, I don't know, attractive in some sort of subjective sense. So she felt leered at. And she said, I feel like that happens to me a lot. But there's something off about this place. And so I went with her to one of the meetings. What I was fascinated by was, yes, she actually was being leered at, but also that there was no one to talk to about it. And so she had to find her own safety by leaving it. But it felt to me like someone would say something really big and heavy and deep. And then in response, I pictured people going to like the card section or Hallmark card section and just taking cards and just like throwing them at her. Here's this phrase and here's this thing, one day at a time. And did they actually hear what she said? Do they know how to respond? Or they just have these, let's just reach into this bowl and take out a piece of paper. That's one of the phrases that we've learned to use. And I don't know how much people actually feel heard, but also, are they being asked the questions?
Oh, you're hitting a lot of good things there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a term for this that we talk about, and that's slogan therapy, right? AA is the master of slogan therapy. It's one day at a time, keep it simple, stupid, KISS. They have acronyms for everything, take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth, and you might learn something. It's endless. And once you learn the jargon, you just repeat that shit over and over with people. And then you become a guru. I became a guru very fast because I was so steeped in it. I knew all the lingo since I was a kid. So it's embarrassing to me now that I went through that, but I had to deconstruct it. I had to be in it to deconstruct it. So people have often asked me about the freedom model. They say, well, you have a method, you have structure, you have products, you make money at this. And I go, yeah, but all my students have an end date. They move on, dude. I don't talk to my students after 3 sessions. They're gone. I say, go move on and forget this ever happened. You're free to live your life. And so I've had 27,000 people that I've coached. You know how many I talked to? 0. Once it's done, it's done. You go live, because my whole mission is deconstructing how you're trapped. This isn't a model of trapping you. This is a model of what are you believing that's factually incorrect. And then you come up with your own solution because you're your own thinking apparatus. I couldn't even possibly understand what's going on inside of you. So I ask questions. My whole coaching method is the Socratic method. It's asking questions for them to self-discover based on what myths do you hang on to. Tell me what you think about alcohol. And if they say 5 things, out of 5 things, 3 of them are going to be untrue. And then I go, okay, these 3 things are untrue and that's causing you confusion. Let me clarify that for you. And that's how that works. And then once you know the truth and there's nothing to be scared of, there's no personified evil alcohol, there's no disease like cancer, there's no progressive brain disorder, there's none of that present. So then the person can go, oh, well, I like alcohol for these other reasons. Well, let's get into that. Are you getting the benefits of alcohol that you believe you're getting? Let's challenge that. Simple. And people go, oh my, yeah. And that's it. It's not complicated. What complicates it is all the mythology.
Okay. What's also interesting, though, is that when you say it's simple, I want to say it's not simple for a lot of people because you are willing to hear someone and follow their lead. Like, let me understand you and see your life. And what I think would be helpful to you, which means you need to personalize the response, the treatment, and you can't just throw slogans. You actually have to hear, and you have to be willing, I think, to have some sort of flexibility and also training. Like, if this doesn't work, how about this? Because I think you move out of the, if all you have is a hammer, everyone has to be a nail kind of idea, then you have a whole toolbox. But I don't know if people think like, oh, if I can just jump into this that's ready-made, fast food rather than a restaurant, then I don't have to think. I feel like I can get help or I can be helpful, and then I can move on with my day. It's not real work, but you're doing real work.
Yes. I've done the formulaic nonsense, and we actually talk about that in the book. I can't wait for you to read the book. You're going to be blown away. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. We talk about helping people move past confounding confusion is not like baking a cake, because what we're dealing with is confusion. Confusion of ideas, beliefs that are not based in actual objective truth. And whenever we believe something that is factually incorrect, and then we act upon that untruth, we can only harm ourselves. That's simply the way truth works. And the freedom model, the word God isn't in it. There's no spiritual angle. What we're talking about is a substance or substances with a tremendous amount of misinformation surrounding those experiences. And then I do want to back up a little bit and say, it's simple in the end to get over the problem when all the mythology is debunked. But getting there can be really complicated with people. It took me 10 to 12 years to sort out all the cult shit, to be like, what is real? I didn't have the freedom model written for me. I was like, what is real? I don't even know where to start. And so it was a real hard climb. It was clawing up this jungle cliff. And it took me many years. And then one day there was enough clarity where I could finally look back and go, that's crazy. What I was just doing is nuts. And so is that. That tree looks kind of like that one. And I started to get perspective. And then eventually I came out of the trees and I was like, I'm okay. I'm my own person. That's where it gets simple. When you finally understand your autonomy, that you are your own ability to think. That is what you are. You're autonomous and you're protected in your autonomy. That's how you navigate the world, is through your ability to have your own internal ideas. And then you get to challenge them. You get to challenge, is that idea correct for me? That's what I do in coaching. I say, does that idea work? How is it going? Well, then let's challenge that. And people go, oh, I can do that? I go, yeah, let me help you challenge that. It's so cool. It's so cool.
It is so cool. And I think also that you don't convey this message that so many people get in 12-step and other groups, which is that, yeah, let's go over what you're trying. And that if it doesn't work, it's not because of you. It's not some weakness. It's not that you didn't really want it to succeed.
Oh, yes.
Right? All of that. If you're also coming from a place of really wanting to help, you need to have the lack of ego need to be right and to just put it on the other person. Like, well, you're just not doing it enough. Or you're not feeling it in your heart. Whatever. You haven't surrendered enough to it. But to be able to say, oh, guess that didn't work for you. All right, let's try this.
Yes. There's a beauty in our coaching method. We call it cognitive behavioral education. When you're educating somebody, you're giving them facts that allow them, that are external. The facts sit, and the truth is the truth. The research is the research. When you sift through enough of it, like I've done for 36 years, there's a lot of bad research too. But you sift through it and you find the valid points. And then you present that to somebody. I'm not going in and saying, you have to believe this. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying, how is your belief system working in this fine point, this idea that you have about alcohol? Is it working? No, I'm really confused about that. Well, here's a point of factual research that refutes what you're saying. Why don't you study that and see what you think about it? Think about it. And then let's have another session and we'll discuss that. The information that I'm providing is so conclusive that they're blown away. And I say, so if you had a legitimate disease like cancer, do you know somebody with cancer? Sure. I say, would you send them to a meeting? If you have a chronic progressive brain cancer, because that's what they're telling you have with alcoholism. That's the new enlightened version. Would you go to a meeting? I don't think so. I think you would see somebody, an oncologist, to look at the cells. Now, if we look at your drinking, we can't even look at that. There's no pathology. There's nothing. There's ideas about drinking, but it's not the same as cancer, is it? And so now we're starting to get facts that nobody's really presenting to them. There's no, you have a progressive chronic brain disease and your neurobiology is conspiring against you. How exactly does your brain then tell you to drink? I want to know exactly how biology is telling you to physically get in your car. Tell me how that happens. And they say, well, I don't know. And I say, well, it doesn't. You have a mind and you like drinking. Does that sound more plausible? And they go, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It is so interesting too, because I think as you're talking, with the amount of work that it has taken to undo the programming, because things repeated over and over and over again get embedded. We make these neural links and then you have to undo it. I'm wondering, a lot of the people listening to this podcast are people who either they themselves or their loved ones are dealing with the thought-stopping cliches in their head, all the phrases, the things that they have to keep batting away just to say, like, wait, wait, what's true for me or what I really think? Or is that a helpful thought? Or is that what they wanted me to believe because that worked for them, that organization, more than it worked for me? So I'm wondering if there are some phrases that you think have real sticking power and what you do when they pop into your head. How do you combat them? How do you quiet them? Do you need to replace them with other things? What's a good technique for that?
Well, in coaching, it depends. It depends on the level of indoctrination. Let's start there. So you have various levels, infinite levels of indoctrination into mythology. That's what we're talking about. It's mythology. It is nothing more. It is mythology. Now, a person like me was steeped in it, drowning in it. It's almost killing me. That's where it ended. It's just utter defeat because every thought I had was told was wrong. And I had a severely abused childhood as well. So there was no relief anywhere. Now, that's an extreme example. So it took me and Jerry a long, long time to undo because almost everything I thought was not true. And I was told deeply that I couldn't think for myself. So it was a massive struggle. And I'm teaching crap while I'm figuring it out. So that's an extreme example. So we could start there. But then I get thousands of people a year that just read the book and they go, oh my God, there was 5 things in there that changed my life. I'm free. And I get those letters every day. And they're like, but those are people that went to 5 meetings. They kind of went to an outpatient program. They knew this is kind of fucked up. And this is weird. This is weird land. But they believe a little bit of the alcoholism idea because they don't know the difference. So you have that as one extreme. You have me as the other extreme. And then everything in between is basically, I have developed ways of teaching education of how to debunk. Like some people look at a video workshop that I've built because they learn by seeing and hearing. And they need that coupled with one session. And we've honed in on maybe some real sticking point, like the addict identity. I think I'm an addict. And so maybe there's 5 myths that I have to tackle in a session in 90 minutes. So I go, you have these 5 things. Here's the chapters that's going to refute it. Here's this workshop. Take this piece. And that's your homework, but let's talk about it together. So that would be an example where in my coaching certification, I teach people how to identify the myths. If that person has a list of myths that's like mine, that's going to be a whole coaching package, workshop, Freedom Model online program with 170 video tutorials. We got a lot of work to do. But if their list is this long, it's one session, read the book, listen to the audiobook on your way to work, live your life, dude. It's really, you're okay. And that's enough. So it really depends on the level of mythology.
That's incredible. It's funny. I'm picturing a whole video series for you that could just be called Live Your Life, Dude. You're okay.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like,
yes.
Let's boil it down to what your messaging is. You're gifting people the idea that they can actually have a happy life with them at the helm of it and that they can be trusted to hold the reins and that it's hopeful and it's positive and you're like, you got this. People just don't hear that. And it's such a shame.
So what you just brought up is the very difference. When I met Jerry, the very next day, I said, let's start a retreat with people. I have no idea what I'm doing, but can we start a retreat and let's just tell people that they can be okay?
Oh, that's fascinating. Right.
And see what happens. And Jerry goes, I think that's brilliant. And let's not have rules. And it was a fucking madhouse. What we did was totally crazy. At the end of that first year, we had 38 study subjects. We wrote a paper about this. And the paper is hilarious because it's the Baldwin Research Project in 1990. We had a 75% success rate with abstinence at the end of 1 year just by telling people, you're not powerless, you have a choice. We didn't even know if that was true. We just merely threw a concept that was the opposite of the other concept. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of our 11-year observational study where we tested each platitude that AA would throw out. And we would say, let's do the opposite and then test it. And we just did it over and over and over. And it was a madhouse. It was crazy. AA came after us. It was brutal, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful because people moved on, man. That's when I started to realize, oh my God, if you just let people know they can be okay. They don't have a progressive brain disorder. They don't. There's no evidence of that. Yes, your brain changes when you drink and drug, but it's ironic. I'm going to tell you something here, and I want the listeners to listen to this. You go into a treatment center. They say your brain has changed, therefore you can't stop. You're compelled now by your biology. The next thing they teach you is that you have to hit rock bottom. Well, at rock bottom, your brain would be changed the most. So which is it? Does the changed brain compel you and force you to use? Or do we need to hit rock bottom where you have the most changed brain in order to change and stop? You can't have it both ways. So when I point out these things, I say, what does the research tell us? It tells us that in the aggregate spectrum of use, essentially everybody gets over the problem, especially if they're not put in treatment. Given enough time, over 96% of heroin users move on, and 80% of them never see a treatment center. That's a fact based on the largest government study in NESARC ever conducted. And this observational longitudinal study is still going on to this day. This is decades of research, and they know that 91% of drinkers get over the problem. 50% moderate to non-problematic levels on their own. 41% abstain for the rest of their lives. 80% of them never went to formal treatment or an AA meeting or anything. So we already know that autonomy, what I call the positive drive principle, and free will reigns supreme. Humans get over addictions that aren't really addictions at all. They're habits that are confounding and confusing, and people sort that shit out. Now, what I do in the freedom model is I just do it quicker. I just take the same data and I just make it happen. Instead of you wandering out there in a dangerous zone trying to figure it out like I did by yourself, I just put it all in one place and say, here's all the data so that you can make this decision in the next 10 days.
Incredible. I juxtapose that with your experience in residential, where you had to just keep getting knocked down so that treatment was needed in your life. Same thing, I guess, with AA. We need to keep having you dependent on us, and we're going to find a way to do that. God, it's reminding me, when you're just talking about being positive and telling people, like, you got this in your own way, and trusting people. And also, yeah, I'm picturing without the structure that it was probably chaos at the beginning, but it was like, it can be this lovely chaos too.
It was wonderful. It was
right?
Beautiful. Yeah.
Because then you get to really see what's on people's minds. They don't have to fit into this constructed thing that's very limiting. It's reminding, I know we're about done with time, because I spent a lot of time at schools doing counseling, dropping my kids off, whatever. And even interactions between parents and children here, I would sometimes hear what parents would say when they dropped their kids off at school. And the kids who would be told, try to behave. I don't want to get a call from the principal. Versus the, have a great day, or let me know what happens with the blah, 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 or ask interesting questions. I can't wait to hear what you learned. Those kids are happy. They were adjusted. They were trusted. There wasn't even a thing about don't. It was go and be and do. And they did so much better.
Yes. Jerry, I got to give him his due. He was 48 years old when we started this, and I was 19. And he had guts, man. He said, no rules. And he meant it. Now, the only rule was you can't drink and drug, and we didn't want people dying in the house.
That seems important.
Yeah, that was the one qualification. And sometimes people didn't follow that either. Now, nobody died, but certainly they drank and drugged every once in a while. But he was so good at teaching me how to just put myself aside and do research and let people be who they were, that it was such a profound training, because in the end, our coaching model is the same model. I have no dog in your fight. I have no ego. I'm here purely to educate you on what is true, ask questions, and then allow you to live your life the way you want to, have a self-discovery process happen.
I love this. Tell people where they can find your book, your everything. You have a lot that is wonderful for the public. So where can people find it?
Okay, we have the Freedom Model YouTube channel, which has over 2,000 videos. We have thefreedommodel.org that has all our coaching. If you want to be a coach with us, there's all the books, the workshops, the online program, all the stuff we were talking about is all there for your disposal. Peruse it and enjoy yourself.
I love it. Okay. It was a pleasure to talk to you. It's really important discussions. And I think about all the social service agencies I worked at where you were supposed to give referrals to people after they left the program. And usually there was a whole list of people like therapists and hospitals and different things. But when it came to addiction, AA was the only thing in that section ever. I love that there are other places for people to go that are science-based and that really are looking at things holistically and seeing the big picture and zooming out and all of it. It's so reassuring to know that. Thank you so much for today and for the work that you do in general.
Well, thank you for having me.
One more thing before you go. Thank you so much to Mark for all the work that he has done to bring us and others so much that is cutting edge about recovery for people who really, really want to be able to do this in a different way, especially people who have had a bad experience in 12-step. There are times that I have some misgivings about telling people 12-step are not good. If it's worked for them and if it's worked for you, please continue to do it. What's also true is that people have come to me over many years and have said, it messed me up, actually, to be in 12-step. And so I have learned from the people who have come to me afterwards, who have said these things to me. I'm not out to get the 12-step programs taken down. What is concerning is this idea that you have a disease. Mark and I talked about this idea that a lot of people will be self-medicating. They'll be having a hard time with something else in their lives, but there isn't an opportunity for them to really address that within a 12-step. And instead, they're called something and they have to call themselves something like an alcoholic or an addict. And then they have that moniker, they have that label on top of everything else, but they still haven't gotten to the root of what was causing the need to want to not be present or to drown out what they were thinking or feeling. And so when you don't get behind it, then you're just dealing with the behaviors. I had that a lot when I was working with families, when I was working in schools as school counselor. What happens within so many environments is that if someone does something wrong, they're sent somewhere to curb that behavior. But what do we really need to learn here? We need to learn why this is happening. If a child is brought to my office because the parent says, my child lies all the time. Well, it could be that they have an issue, they have a disorder. But I also want to make sure that they're not lying because they feel that's the only way to keep themselves safe. That if they were to tell the truth, they would be disrespected, that they would be punished. They're kind of learning a coping mechanism, an adaptation by not telling the truth. And it's because of the environment that they're behaving this way, not because of something that is naturally part of their wiring and would be their first choice about how to interact with people in the world. There is so much also that happens within these models that can feel connected but also detached. And so when we talk about the use of slogans, and we've all heard so many of these slogans that have come out of 12-step or have been used by 12-step and pop psychology, etc., large group awareness trainings, people will feel that they're being helpful. They'll go into a meeting, leading a meeting, let's say, being there for other people, being someone's sponsor, and they'll reiterate a lot of these slogans and a lot of these sayings, and again, feel that they're really providing help. And I think the intention for most people is to provide help. The problem is that there is, for some people, this disconnection. They don't really have to feel what they're saying. It's almost like being in a play and you say line and someone hands you your line, reminds you what you're supposed to say in this situation. And just like if you were to play a character in a play, you wouldn't feel like you're really totally present. You know you're in a play. And so the person who you're saying it to may feel cared for, but also may not, may feel like this person who's feeling like they're helping me, they're just saying the same things they're supposed to say. They're also not taught, I think, how to be there with somebody who's really feeling something, who's really struggling with something. That's okay, because people within 12-step and other groups like it, large group awareness trainings, religious organizations, they might use a lot of these slogans. They're not trained mental health professionals necessarily, and so they might not know what to do or to say. And if someone's really struggling, instead of just throwing lines at them that may or may not stick, that may or may not help, that may or may not fit, you might want to refer them to someone to talk to who has some training, who can really kind of jump into the muck. And when a group teaches you what to say, like here are all your lines, then that's what you have. That's all you have. You just keep repeating those things. And if someone isn't listening and it's not working, the natural outcome of that is to blame the victim, is to say to the other person, well, you weren't taking it in when I was saying it to you. And you weren't fully present when I was saying it to you. Like somehow you as the listener, you as the person suffering are doing something wrong because this isn't working. And it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be perfect. It really adds insult to injury, sometimes quite literally. And so I want to make sure that people know that if they go into these environments and they really have issues that they need to address, and the things that are being presented to them in these organizations just don't feel like they're connecting with them and they don't feel heard, there's a reason. It can feel detached. It can feel like it's a phrase that's supposed to show that the person cares who's saying it, but what it can often do is it can bypass empathy. It can make a person who's saying it feel that they're being helpful, and the other person might smile and say, thank you very much, but inside they don't really feel taken care of. So to the people who are in those situations where they're saying these things to other people, read your audience and see if it's helping. And if it's not, don't just give them more of the same. It's like a doctor prescribing the same medication over and over again that's not working. Be open, be flexible to acknowledge that maybe what you have here is limited and it's not everything the other person really needs. Thank you again to Mark for all of his work, all of his devotion to his work. And I will talk to you all next week.
Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctriNation Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.